larger than screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempt the mental robbery, executed sloppily. The hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome back to Rogue Ways, where tonight we're talking about the birth control scam. The scam that is birth control. Contraceptive scam. The things we were never told would go horribly wrong with us if we were to use birth control for extended periods of time. The things that we didn't never know. They're also just finding out all the time more and more. But some of these things were like, probably pretty obvious we shouldn't go messing with all of this, but we do live in a eugenicist wet dream. And so birth control, it is birth control for everyone. Again, I also don't know about you, but when I was young, birth control was just like, yeah, take it like candy. What, you're 12? Start taking birth control. And it was for all kinds of things, right? It wasn't just so people could have sex, although that is the main reason. But there were people who would have like acne and they'd get prescribed birth control just in case it might help, or people would have, hard periods. And so they'd get prescribed birth control in case it would help. And, boys didn't as much have this sort of problem, obviously. Their birth control is much more often going to be condoms and vasectomies. So there's a lot less that can go wrong with some of those. Although we will be looking at vasectomies tonight too and seeing some of the side effects of vasectomies that I think are worth looking into. It's for some reason a hotly debated, very contentious topic, and it tends to go, false left-right paradigm where the, false lefties are saying like, we need birth control, we need it for everyone, especially we need abortion, we need all of this, or else it's a crime, or else people are lost, or else we're condemning them to a horrible life. And then on the sort of false left-right paradigm, the right side is like, we should never have it because it encourages, being a whore and just the erosion of family values and all of this. And the truth, as always, is somewhere in the middle, actually. And what's interesting to me is, as I come from the leftist sort of background, and now am neither left nor right, but that was my background. And in the leftist paradigm, there was all kinds of things that I didn't know about side effects and downsides of all of this culture, I'm going to say, this eugenicist culture of birth control that we live in now. Never questioned it. No one I knew questioned it. I didn't actually hear a lot of the other side's arguments, and this is true for almost everything. When I was a leftist, is I just had an idea about what I thought Republicans and conservatives were, and I ran with it. And I think that's true of almost all leftists, almost all the time. And what I have found, actually, is, some people think that I'm right-wing now because I'm just not so left-wing. But what I have found, actually, upon becoming less left, is that the right-wing actually does usually know the arguments of the left, and the left doesn't actually usually know the arguments of the right. And I find that fascinating. It's also been fascinating to find out that, as a leftist, we used to say we're the most educated, so we're the intelligent party. But then I, at some point, heard this statistic, this study that was like, Republicans have higher IQs on average, they're more intelligent. And I was like, hold up, that's what we said about ourselves. And then I thought about it and I was like, oh, we didn't though. We said we were more educated, and that is true. Leftists tend to have more years of college, more degrees, and right people on the right tend to have higher IQs. Isn't that interesting how those two things are not necessarily correlated? That being educated does not necessarily mean you're intelligent. Yeah, very interesting. So anyways, that's not what tonight's topic is, but those are the things that people get triggered. People get triggered when we talk about birth control, and they get triggered from the left and the right for various reasons. But we're just going to look at it with, whatever bias we have here, since you can't get rid of it. But hopefully somewhat of an open mind and interesting things will come through. So let's talk about it. Here we go. Rogueways.org is the place to be. This is where everything I do is the classes I teach, my shop where you can buy the things that I make, like Powerful Orgone, all of the one-on-one sessions I do with people, from physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. I do work with people one-on-one, so you can book that here. All of my books are here. You can buy them from me on the site at rogueways.org, or you can get them from Audible, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and other places where books are sold or listened to, as it may be. All of that here on the site. And I always want you to go to rogueways.substack.com. Substack is where you can be my subscriber, my supporter, support what I do. If you love the content that you get here, if you found value in me over the years, this is a great place to support the show. But more than that, you also get additional content. I do my channeled messages come through here. You get them here, and also free articles. So if you want to subscribe just to keep in touch, it's a fantastic way to do that. If you also want to support and get some of those channel messages, it's a fantastic way to do that. The most recent is Keeper of the Flame on past lives and how to remember them, think about them, and some examples of the same. That's at rogueways.substack.com. So we're going to start here. This is a journal article. This is from 2021. It's a systematic review on clinical effectiveness, side effect profile, and meta-analysis on continuation rate of etonogestrel contraceptive implant. This is on, like it says, the contraceptive implant, but it is really studying the long-term use of these hormones in the body. This via the IUD that releases hormones over time, different from the copper IUD, which also has its own sort of risks. But this is only after a year. And I'm basically actually bringing this up because they these types of studies can be really helpful where they're doing a meta-analysis where they're grabbing all of these. And I did this when I was in grad school, and you would do it if you've gone to grad school as well. You gather as many studies as you can on a topic, and you do a meta-analysis of it to see the overall findings, multiple studies on one topic. But all of these were only short term. So I'm more interested in what is the long-term effect? If after 1 year, sure, you can see some effects, you can see what might happen. Taking birth control, taking hormones, putting them in your body, having them released in your body consistently over time. But what happens 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later? A lot of these birth controls are being used by young children. Like I said, once you're 12, you're menstruating, you might get some hormones, you might get some birth control, even if you're not sexually active. So what are the effects there? Well, I'm 43 now. I'm 43 now. I'm laughing because I never remember how old I am. I'm 43 now, and I am in perimenopause, and have been for a long time, actually. And part of this is because I also have a thyroid disorder, but part of it is potentially because of taking so much birth control when I was young. I started taking birth control when I was 12. I don't think I stopped till I was 23. So 11 years straight of birth control, various kinds. Depo-Provera, that's the injection into the butt cheek. I got that for a couple years. I had an IUD for a minute until it gave me a horrifying infection. I had to go to the emergency room and have it be removed. I had the pill mostly, right? Most of the time. And eventually when I was about 23, 24, somewhere in there, I got tubal ligation. So I didn't have to take birth control anymore. And that also has some effects. So how much of this is the reason why I've had just horrendous hormonal situation? People aren't supposed to necessarily be in perimenopause at the age of 43. In fact, historically, we can see humans, even in really stressful, impoverished times and places, were having babies up to 50, sometimes 60 years old. So you might say, well, before we had all this intervention, all this hormone intervention, we had more fertility, perhaps. We had perhaps the ability to have babies for longer. Perimenopause and menopause were put off even longer. And I'm not even necessarily saying I want that. I don't even care if I have my period or not. I'm not attached to it. It's just, for me, perimenopause has been pure hell. And for many women it is. But it seems like it is more often true for those of us who had long use of hormones when we were young, birth control when we were young. So we didn't know we were condemning ourselves to such a bleak future, right? So that we don't have these sort of long-term studies. This is sort of a new idea that's sort of coming about, that this is perhaps affecting people negatively. Another one, even though it's only slightly on topic, I'll mention is that if you were sort of a partier, if you were like me, you did heavy drugs, you smoked a lot, you know, for a long term, for decades, drinking heavily, all of this sort of stuff, then you also may have a higher risk of really severe hormonal imbalance during perimenopause or early perimenopause by 10 years on average, they're saying. So we didn't know what we didn't know what we did to ourselves. And it affects men too. Again, we're going to get to men too, but a lot of good studies on this sort of stuff, especially over longitudinal, the long term. This other interesting thing has come up, and so fascinating. We're finding more and more that contraceptive pills affect our attraction, the type of person we're attracted to. And this is where we get to, too. A lot of people get to this place where we start to understand hormones are everything. Over the past 8 years, again, I have a thyroid disorder that's already a hormonal disorder. It's autoimmune in my case as well. And then that affects all your other hormones. And then, you go into perimenopause. Well, now you're even more affected. And so just a hormonal nightmare over here. You might have noticed some of these things that I've figured out over the years of how to help myself heal. I've had to come to this understanding that metabolism is key and hormones are key, right? Our endocrine system is key. That's our hormonal system, our endocrine system. All of our glands are key. Glandular health is key. And so, my whole life has been just like ripped apart by this stuff, and in ways that I would have never thought hormones would affect, but they affect your ability to think clearly or not. They affect your ability to lose or retain fat or not. They affect your ability, so your physical composition is affected, your mood is affected, everything is affected, your tissues are affected, your everything. I can't think of a single thing that isn't. In fact, your whole life, in fact, is hormones. So it's not that surprising then that we're finding that contraceptive affects who we're attracted to. We think this is something that is inside of us of like, I'm attracted to this type of person, but you might be attracted to that type of person because of the hormones that are influencing you. Right? I know about the soul level and the emotional level and the mental level and how these things work in order to attract each other. That's true. And also your hormones can block and confuse much of that signaling. And that's fascinating. So what they find is that even your pheromones, your ability to detect and use pheromones to your advantage is reduced when you're taking these hormones, when you're taking birth control. Heterosexual, hold up. So the pills introduce hormones that suppress ovulation, lead to temporary fertility loss, similarly to what happens during pregnancy. Consequently, heterosexual women's perception of men may serve a different function than that occurring around ovulation. They may pursue a cooperative partner who assists with childcare rather than a genetically compatible partner. This is one of their reasons they're putting together as to why women who are taking birth control prefer what we might just call beta males, right? Beta males. That beta attitude, that attitude of like, yeah, I'm kind of a cuck and I'll do whatever you want. That like somewhat weaker aspect of masculinity, let's be honest. Whereas when you are not on these hormones or not in this false pregnancy state, you prefer an alpha male because that's genetically superior. Somebody who can provide and is that sort of epitome of traditional masculine energy that is more attractive to you. And those times then you get on the hair hormones and now you like the beta males. This is fascinating, actually. This has so many implications. This isn't just a eugenicist dream because you're taking birth control and not having babies. It's eugenicist dreams because this leads you into relationships that do not actually serve you and also do not create the highest level outcome of child, potentially. If our pheromones and these other instincts serve to make the most genetically appropriate child, then this would serve to dismantle that and make the entire breeding population less successful. And remember, eugenics is actually allegedly attempting to create a purer race or a more genetically superior race. But remember, that doesn't include you and me. Like the poor people don't count. Like people who aren't already in the psychopath class aren't part of that equation. So they're going to go about their genetic nightmares of creation. We are left to not be a part of. They don't care. In fact, what they would like is for us to be, again, reproducing less, creating less children, and definitely creating weaker ones. Easier to control if you're weak, right? So fascinating what this could apply, again, just for many generations, intergenerationally, and also for the entire culture, where suddenly the beta male is the predominant one. The beta male is the one that gets the most play, perhaps. I mean, like, most women have taken, will take, or use birth control. So very, very interesting. Although, again, lately we've seen this sort of trad wife, this sort of Chad and trad movement that is moving away from some of these things, where it is much more traditional family values and structures and goals. And a lot of that culture is shunning birth control, which I'll say, based on everything we're going to talk about today, is a good choice. So women have opposite mate preferences depending on whether or not they are using contraceptive. They've also said that therefore this means that some women will be on birth control. You know, they're dating, they're meeting people, so they're on birth control because they're not really ready to have their child yet. They haven't committed to someone yet. Then they find someone, you know, they're in love, they get married, and then they stop taking birth control because now they're going to have children. And all of a sudden they're not interested in their partner. So this is actually also affecting divorce rates potentially. Right? It's affecting broken families potentially, because you might say like, oh, but I mean, I obviously love them. We got married, so let's push through it. Let's have kids. Oh no, actually, I really don't. It's never come back. I still don't find myself attracted to this person or in love with this person anymore. That's crazy. That's such a huge effect. That alone might make you not choose to ever use birth control if you really understood that. Again, though, like if you're 12, 13, 14, 15, I mean, all the way up till 25, you don't have your long-term rational brain, and it's not there yet. It's not done developing. You don't have the ability to truly understand long-term decisions until around the age of 25. This is the last part of you to develop physically. So you might have something of it because of character, because of development, because of how you were trained, because of your education, your parents, whatever. But you don't realistically have the ability to deeply understand it until you're 25. By then, you may have already been on birth control for 13 years. You may have already gotten married, had your kid, right? So the idea that we're giving this to kids as well, that is just almost ubiquitously accepted and acceptable, it begs the question of what we're doing to our society, to our kids, to our children, and to our future. So a very interesting finding there. Very interesting to wonder if anybody even likes their mate. If they have birth control in their life, and they have in the previous, even, I don't know, few years or something. They say it's pretty instant, the change, but still, like, can it affect you for a little while? What if you quit taking it and then you go meet someone and then it finally gets out of your system a little bit later, or your system personally like finally normalizes and rebalances? It takes a while. I don't know. These things are not studied deeply enough or well enough yet. So pretty fascinating. It's pretty recent developments to find this. That was 2024, for example. This is 2014. This is the actual study itself. Okay, so it's a little bit longer out. We're 10 years out from showing this. They say worldwide it's used by more than 60 million women. I would have thought it'd be higher, to be quite honest. I'm sure they're not counting kind of folk birth controls like black cohosh and different sorts of herbs that can affect your hormones also. And so, yeah, this is talking about how it's changed family roles, gender roles, its social life for women. And it's true, right? We wouldn't have this sort of feminist revolution without it if we didn't have the ability to continue to enjoy relationships sexually, but also not have a child and not be in that sort of economic pressure. And so therefore we would be able to have our careers and our work and be the boss bitches and all of this stuff. And so feminism definitely goes hand in hand with birth control. And I think this is another reason why the left is so quick to defend it, even if there are problems with it, and so loath to look at the problems because they feel like their precious feminism is at stake. Um, so maybe that's part of it. But yeah, these results in this study indicate that with regard to mate selection, taking the pill may psychologically influence women's preference for certain characteristics of an ideal sexual partner. In particular, the indicators of masculinity would be considered more attractive in the central phase of the cycle than other phases, as well as for both pill and non-pill users. That's a confusing way of saying that, like, yes, the women on the pill do not prefer traditional masculinity as much as they prefer beta males, except when they're ovulating. And when they're ovulating, they still want, um, the masculine, the traditional masculine energy, and the rest of the time they don't. But other people who aren't taking birth control want the traditional masculinity all the time. More so, right? It's more pronounced. So they have to say it so confusing. They can't just be clear. This study from 2009 says unnatural selection, birth control pills may alter the choice of partners. Again, it's another even earlier. Their underappreciated impact on choice of partners for both women and men, and possibly also on reproductive success. Meaning that you may literally be less fertile or rather less compatible with the mate you choose. So it's not just about the sort of quality of the fetus and the child. It is also that, like, it might actually be harder for you to get pregnant because you are not with someone who actually matched your genetic needs, which is what pheromones are hypothesized to be all about, right? So if you're pheromonal and your hormonal system is compromised, you're not able to choose the appropriate mate that could be the one that actually you get pregnant with, right? So that's really fascinating as well. Just genetically the wrong choice for a race to choose, right? If your goal is the success of the human species, this is so far not looking good for us. Not looking good for us. And then there are long-term side effects of birth control. So, they say for most people being on birth control long-term is safe. Well, define safe, because it actually turns out there are all of these risks and they don't seem that well studied. And so even the hints of the studies of the things that we have found so far, like, not as fleshed out as they should be, especially given how many people use this and rely on this. For example, they say here, birth control can lower your risk from some cancers. Again, that's just a thought, maybe, right? They say maybe because it seems like once people took birth control, there was less of cervical and some other cancers. But it says it raises your risk for others, specifically breast cancer is one of the cancers that is raised if you have been on hormones of any kind, if you have been on birth control in your life. That's a pretty big one. It's one of the biggest killers of women, right? Is breast cancer. So you're like, well, if all these women are taking birth control and it can perhaps potentially reduce the risk of some, but also is strongly indicated to increase your risk for some. So when you took birth control when you were a kid, or your daughter did, or your friend did, or whoever, were they told, by the way, you might choose the wrong mate, end up in the wrong life, like not be able to have a kid, and also you might get breast cancer? Maybe they technically told us all this. Just maybe I didn't read the fine print, but I don't think that was in my insert. I could be wrong. It also can cause blood clots, heart attacks, and strokes. And the longer you use it, the more you use it, the more that can be true, because hormones affect all of these things in your body. Just long-term disruption of your natural hormonal state can lead to these things. They do say, but the risks are small. Are they? I don't know anymore. What do you guys think is small? You think the risk of an untested emergency injection is small. So is this a small risk or not? Hard to say these days what you mean by that. I don't think any risk, if it increases all of those things I just said, is all that small. For what? Because when it comes down to it, this is not an actually, however you want to say it, but necessary. It's not medically necessary, right? It's not like you have this problem. If you don't take this, you might die, or you might live this really poor life, right? It's like you could just not have sex is the point. You don't have to have sex, and you don't have to take this pill. And if you take it, it could lead to all these negative things. Oh, and by the way, let's give it to all these people who can't actually think long term. Like, it gets worse and worse the more I think about it, the more I look at it, right? It also says here being on birth control doesn't make it harder to become pregnant once you stop it, but we have no way of proving that. We have actually no way of knowing that. Fertility rates have dropped dramatically over time, and at that same time, birth control rates have gone far up, and they are often correlated together. So how do you know? How do you know this isn't one of the many things that is causing the drop in infertility, this infertility crisis that we have? I don't think they know. Oh, and they just get weirder and weirder versions also. We couldn't just stick with the sort of just like taking some hormones. We have to like make it as weird as possible. Get an arm implant. So anyways, that's some of the long-term side effects of these hormones that are disgusting. Let's see if there's any new ones. I must have pulled this up for a reason. They always are like, oh, they're safe for most people as long as you have a doctor's approval. I mean, as doctors have the number one professional, they have the highest, they kill the most people by profession. It's just like obviously. But a lot of that is malpractice or the inability to understand like how different things may react together. And especially in this culture we're in now, we're like, how much time do you even spend with your doctor? Do they even know you? Do they even know anything about what you eat, what you drink, where you live, if your house has mold, like if anything at all, ever? Or do they just say, what's your symptom? Here's a prescription. So I'm sure they'll approve you to take some hormones if you want. So I'm sure they won't think too hard about anything unless it's just like very clearly contraindicated, right? Very, very obviously and very, very clearly contraindicated. And even then they might miss it. So short-term side effects, of course, of taking birth control can include bleeding, spotting, headaches, nausea, breast tenderness, weight gain, mood swings. Those are big enough. Those are big enough symptoms. You're just like, oh, no, it's fine. You just might gain weight, have headaches, have really bad periods, have a horrible mood swings for a while. And you're like, I mean, that's my whole life. So my whole life will be a little bit hellish is what you're saying. No big deal. No big deal. Just some pretty awful shit. And then long-term, you can have things like this. And here we're getting down to it too. Endometriosis. How many people have endometriosis now? Polycystic ovary. How many people have that now? These are hormonal issues, metabolic and hormonal issues. Painful or worsening menopause symptoms. Sometimes people take hormones because of those things. Yes. Sometimes those things are caused because of the hormones you took. Sometimes both. You took hormones that caused it. Now you need hormones to fix it. Again, the increased risk of cancer. Well, they seem to, again, show that it might decrease ovarian and endometrial cancer, but then it increases breast and other cancers. And they just say, you can take it indefinitely. Nobody's really studied that too deeply, but so far it seems like if in the short term you're good, you're good. Even ibuprofen we like pulled back on because of, everyone thought like, oh, ibuprofen's this like miracle NSAID. It doesn't cause like inflammation and it's fine and there's no addiction and there's no like toxicity and like it's just great. And then we found out it like rips apart your gut lining. Right? It's like we've even pulled back on this, but we've never pulled back on hormones. So I just had this article, I guess I pulled it up twice. So they also point out, the older you get, and if you have smoked a lot, then it might be contraindicated. You might need to stop using birth control. You might have high blood pressure from it if you take it too long. Right? If you have a history of blood clots, don't take it. If you have a history of strokes, don't take it. It's like the more you look into it, actually, the more they're saying like these are pretty significant things that can happen to you. We'll just hope that this isn't that connected and that it's something else and this just exacerbates it if you are someone with that condition. And it's like, this is why we also have this issue of not looking at the whole person and not looking longitudinally and not thinking about like what is actually the best thing for the body given the goals that we have here. And turns out there's a lot of options that are way better for the body than just taking birth control all the time. Blood clot, stroke, hypertension. And again, let's be honest, at 35 and older and you've been smoking for a while, if you ever took birth control, again, now you're at risk for this really early perimenopause and a lot of hormonal imbalance that can rip your life apart. And by the way, if you're getting near there or anyone you know is near there, you may have noticed there's not many medical professionals there to help you out with any of that. There's like actually a tradition of very specifically not helping women through perimenopause and menopause, very specifically not understanding it, not caring about it, not wanting to do anything about it, and treating it as though it is just like, oh, it's just a thing. It'll go away in about like 10 to 15 years. Like, damn, that's cruel. That was pretty cruel. So yeah, each type of birth control technically has its own risks and whatever, but they're all similar. And it's because they all are connected with your endocrine system and your metabolism. There's those two keys, again, we come back to. And again, blood clots, heart disease and stroke, cancer, migraines. This drove me insane when I started having migraines like 4 or 5 years ago. I actually had been having them for 10 years, just no one knew because no one gives a crap about anything. I was like, nobody is there to help you through any of this. So I didn't even know I was having migraines at all. I had no idea. Again, there's many stages of a migraine. And I was basically having the prodrome of a migraine over, excuse me, and over and over and over and over. And I never stopped having a prodrome of a migraine. I didn't get to the painful head part of the migraine. I didn't get to the, therefore, hangover part, the postdrome part of the migraine. But I was having the prodrome over and over and over again. This is a hormonal issue. This is an endocrine issue. This is when my Hashimoto started. This is when my thyroid started. This is when my autoimmune started ramping up more than ever. All of that happening at the same time. By the way, I was poisoning myself with arsenic and didn't know it. I was living on a property that was heavily poisoned with arsenic. So this was happening also in connection with that. This is an endocrine disruptor. It's a metabolic disruptor. And so it's a toxin. And so I was having these prodrome of migraines over and over again, over and over. I had no idea. I would just yawn for an hour straight. I was not even tired. I don't even remember all the other symptoms. That was the one that was the most obvious because I was like, this is so weird. Like, what makes you yawn for an hour? And just over and over and over again. I mean, like, I can't even like talk a sentence because I just keep yawning, right? Not normal. Doctor's like, I don't know. Like, nobody cares. They don't care. It's a migraine, dude. Okay, so having that this whole time, no one knew it was hormonal. When it broke into the stage where I now was having the full head pain, the full postdrome. These are like 3 to 4 day migraines, lay you out like you can't function as a human in society anymore for these all these days. By then, I'd already been having them for a while, and still no one said to me that this is hormonal. I was like researching migraines, and it's not even on like the migraine literature sometimes. It's hormonal, dude. If you're a woman having migraines, it's your hormones. You got to get your hormones in check. So it's just in case no one told you, like no one told me, it's your hormones. So yeah, migraines. The only reason you might even have a migraine in your life is because you took birth control. Can you imagine never having had a migraine, never having one again because you didn't take birth control, because people didn't let tiny you take a birth control pill for 12 years or whatever? Yeah, that would have been nice. I mean, I made the choice. I'm not saying it's like everyone else. I'm saying, like, why are we letting children do this? Why are we doing this? Gallbladder, if you have gallbladder issues, hormones, this can also be because you took hormones or you took birth control. Gallbladder disease and gallbladder stones and gallbladder, everything, especially it's connected to Depo-Provera and the IUDs that release the hormones, not the copper IUDs with the others. And so that is something. I mean, if you've had those and you have gallbladder issues, I would assume this is why. This can develop into basically gallbladder cancer. So there's another cancer on the list of cancers potentially caused by taking birth control. And again, they always say, oh, it's been proven to be safe and effective long term. Like, not really, though. You don't actually go through everybody who did this long term and actually find all the symptoms that they've had that indicate this cell death, this metabolic disease, and this endocrine disruption. You don't actually do that. You wait for them to come to you. And then if it is something that ever happens to get connected back, now you say, oh, look at that, but that's rare. Well, it's rare you weren't looking for it. It's rare because you weren't actually even trying. It's rare because nobody actually seems to care about it. It's not actually rare, perhaps. Your sex drive can be affected if you've had low libido in your life, or if you have an exceptionally high ramped up libido. It can also be because your hormones were disrupted because you have endocrine disruption. And then there's all the positive effects. Which is like, if you're already in hormonal imbalance and you take a hormone that you need, it can help you. Well, yeah, duh. But if you're taking it when you didn't actually need it for a hormonal reason, but just so that you could have sex and not get pregnant, that might not be the best choice. And let's be honest, the only reason anyone young might have hormonal disruption is because of the toxic world we live in. That also shouldn't be happening. And so there may actually be technically no reason for a young person to ever take any of these things. A young, healthy person. Can it affect fertility? Yes, it can. It can actually affect your fertility. So all of these things, proven side effects of birth control. So again, people then get to perimenopause and times this, and they start taking birth control again because they're hoping that it helps their hormonal imbalance, or they just get on estrogen, or they just get on progesterone. By the way, I lean heavily towards progesterone. I think most people probably have always needed that. I don't think almost anyone needs estrogen. I'm not a doctor. You should talk to yours and figure out what that death dealer thinks you should do. So again, some people start doing it for perimenopause, but again, this is because you are in hormonal imbalance and you're taking it for this reason. You might not have ever gotten to hormonal imbalance if you never had this in the first place, or if you lived in a world that wasn't full of toxins that disrupt endocrine system. Our endocrine disrupting system is basically what we could call our modern world. It's like men and women both. Again, we're focusing on women right now. We're going to get to men too. Men also have issues because of the toxic world we live in. Anna asks in the chat, the positive is you slipped, tripped, and fell on exactly the right hormone you were deficient in. Yeah, you hope so, right? If you just so happen to, in this endocrine disrupting world, you were like, went to take birth control pills because you didn't want to get pregnant, but it just so happened to be the thing you needed for your hormones to be right. It's possible. So anyways, it becomes even more important the older you get to have a properly working endocrine system and hormonal balance. If you hope to have end of life, the second half of life that is in any way pleasant at all, because again, hormones affect everything, every single aspect of your life, every single bit of it. I talk about this a lot too, where over the past handful of years, again, because my thyroid disorder, because my hormonal and endocrine disruption, my hormonal imbalance, and because of other health issues, I would do fasting. I would fast for like 90 some hours, and I would weigh myself afterwards, and I would weigh more. And that's not supposed to be possible. And therefore people don't even believe me. But you can actually go out and find this from a lot of primarily women, and primarily women who have thyroid issues or endocrine system hormonal issues. And then you find we can fast all we want, and then we literally will gain weight from it. And so this whole idea of calories in, calories out has actually, it's been disproven a billion times, but people are still really attached to it. It's convenient for someone whose entire system is in perfect working order, we'll say, to think of it that way, that whenever you do want to slim down, you cut out a bit of calories. If you want to bulk up, you add in some calories. Sure. That's not the world we live in anymore. We live in a world of endocrine disruption. We live in a world of hormonal imbalance. And in that world, you can have people who eat just tons of calories and never gain weight. And you can have the opposite, people who reduce, like eat only vegetables and like no fat and all of this and like gain weight, or fast and gain weight. So I've actually learned fasting is contraindicated for people with thyroid and hormonal imbalance, they're finding. And there are some ways to integrate some intermittent fasting and other sort of fasting. It is good for your system if done in the right way. And if you're someone with thyroid or hormonal imbalances, I would say, unless you're going to study it so deeply that you know exactly what you can and can't do, don't do it. Not helpful for you. So not a lot of people talk about that. But again, we're in this world of endocrine disruptors. So there's a million of them. Your endocrine system is your hormonal, essentially your glandular and your hormonal system. And all of these chemicals we have in our society are endocrine disruptors. And we know about a lot of them, like the BPA and the plastic and the can lining. And that was a huge endocrine disruptor. And so we've removed that from can linings for the most part. We've removed it from most plastic bottles that we're using for the most part. We don't actually think about all the other ways we encounter it. And we're, someone was talking about our clothes have all these plastics and potentially BPAs and other things in them. And we're like going through our closet, just like clouds of nanoparticles of plastics are just like wafting into our lungs. And I was like, oh my God, our world is so toxic. And I don't know if BPA is actually in our clothes or not, but I'm just saying we don't know for sure where else BPA is being used, or if we're still encountering it. Hopefully we've reduced a lot of it, right? We have these PFAAs in our water source. We have these forever chemicals. Like they find more and more, and they're in our groundwater and they're in our food, and you can't get rid of them. And they're bad for your hormonal system, they're bad for your endocrine system and other things. This is just one of the aspects of yourself that is harmed by these chemicals. Phytoestrogens. For a long time, they were like, oh yeah, women should eat extra soy. Women need estrogen. And no, we don't. Actually, we need so much less for the most part. Most people are estrogen dominant. Most people have too much estrogen, men and women, because of things like this, because of these endocrine disruptors, because of phytoestrogens and xenoestrogens. We have an estrogen problem. It is like estrogen is Satan, in my opinion. You should treat it as such. Pesticides, obviously. Phthalates. So any of your body care that has phthalates in it, which is most of them, unless you're very careful about it. Flame retardants, which are on everything we own practically. And dioxins, which we just had a massive cloud of, just cover the entire country last year in that train crash. So, we're real doing good on getting all these endocrine disruptors inside of us, around us, and in our system. So again, if you may not feel like your hormones are in a disrupted or imbalanced state, and that's great, I would still just try to aim towards even better hormone regulation, especially the older you get, because things can be latent for a while, and then something triggers, the culmination, which is essentially what happened to me. So these disrupt your endocrine system. We say atrazine is in the water as well. This is one of the ones that Alex Jones is famous for saying they're turning the freaking frogs gay. And like there is actually, that is science, that atrazine actually does change the gender sex of frogs. And therefore, it also has an effect on your endocrine system, my endocrine system. It's one of the most common herbicides in the world. BPA, as we said, dioxins, perchlorate is a chemical that's in our groundwater that's found there, and therefore is yet another reason why you should be definitely distilling your water at best, Berkey at least, Berkey filter. PFAs, we talked about phthalates, we talked about phytoestrogens, and more. And so again, we get them in our water, our food, our clothes, all over the place, our body products. So basically almost everything you can think of may be affecting you. Light is a whole other story. We're not even touching that today. Light can also affect your hormones and your hormonal regulation, your endocrine system. And so a lot of these things, the reason that they are this is happening to us is they mimic our real hormones. And so our cell takes it in as though it were a hormone, and it is not. And so that does damage to us. So that's our endocrine disruption system, essentially. And essentially, everyone has, therefore, too much estrogen. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving you medical advice. Go talk to your desk dealer to talk to them about what you should or shouldn't do. But if you have not yet heard that we are basically in an estrogen crisis and that most men and women both have too much estrogen, then now you have an inkling, and perhaps you can look into it a little bit deeper on your own. But estrogen dominance is the state of having too much estrogen or having too little progesterone, or in males, too little testosterone. So when that happens, doctors don't tend to look at it. Doctors are looking for a certain range of estrogen. And if that's normal, in the normal range, which is huge, by the way, and could be wrong for you anyways, but if it's in that range, they'll be like, you're fine. But they're not looking at the ratio of estrogen to progesterone. More and more functional medical providers and sort of alternative types of doctors are looking at that. So if you are lucky enough to have that type of person in your medical life, then that's great. Most of the time, otherwise, it's not something they're looking at. So you could be in a deep state of hormonal dysregulation. You could have estrogen dominance like a M or F'er. I'm on YouTube right now, so I'm trying to be a little bit better than normal. And you could still be passed off as being okay and normal. And you might yawn for an hour and no one cares, right? And that might be not that bad of a symptom, but in a couple years, you might be laid out and unable to function most days of most weeks, right? So it matters. It matters that we're taking care of ourselves in this way and that we are ideally working with people who can help us figure out what's actually going on, take us seriously and help us reach health in this. And if we don't have access to this, you do have to be your own best medical support for yourself, right? You have to learn about these things and find out what you can do otherwise. So estrogen dominance, again, is breast cancer. So when they say, like, when you take long-term these hormones and these birth control pills, you might have an increased risk of breast cancer. Yes, because you may end up with estrogen dominance because of all the xeno and phytoestrogens coming into your system and your body's inability to produce hormones accurately and appropriately for you because of all of the disruption that you've had also when you were taking birth control and the like. So everything is an assault on this system. And then breast cancer is one thing. This is a killer. It kills people. Uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, weight gain. Again, weight gain without necessarily eating any more food. You could do everything you want perfectly and still gain all this weight if you have estrogen dominance. And they might not know you have it. So it's really frustrating, right? Endometriosis, horribly painful. Lupus is a condition that is connected with or caused by estrogen dominance. This is one of those that took them forever to even admit it exists, right? Osteoporosis, your bones can become brittle and break very easily. Again, the longer you go in dysregulation, in imbalance, the worse that will get. Thyroid disorder. Thyroid disorder can be caused by estrogen dominance. And if you have a thyroid disorder and then develop estrogen dominance, watch it get worse and watch them not do anything about it because they don't connect it. Because if you have a thyroid disorder, they're testing maybe 2 or 3 thyroid-related hormones and numbers and nothing else. They do not look at you as a whole person. They do not look at you as the thyroid and the liver are intimately connected. They do not look at you as the thyroid and all of your hormones are intimately connected. Not how the traditional view goes. There's a couple ways they're saying estrogen dominance occurs. Again, we already know it's this system, it's this toxic world, it's all of those inputs that are estrogen and endocrine disruptors. But phytoestrogens are one of those. So soy, flax seeds, black cohosh, dong quai, all of these sorts of things can be negative for you. They can also be helpful. Again, it depends on what you need. Do you actually need more estrogen? I think it's rare. Maybe a few times in your cycle, you do know you need a little bit. And so those days you have some of this, cool. You might find progesterone is actually what you need more of, and eating foods that are higher in progesterone or induced progesterone production will be a little bit more beneficial, and cutting out some of these phytoestrogens is going to be more beneficial. Cattle and poultry can also cause estrogen dominance or be a factor in this because they are pumped with so many hormones themselves, and also other endocrine disruptors. Again, they're eating the food that is coated in the herbicides as all this stuff, and it just gets concentrated the further up the food chain it goes, and then here we are eating it, and now we're being flooded with all of that more endocrine disruptors, more hormones. Xenoestrogens, we talked about. Naturally occurring estrogen, your body actually might just produce too much on its own. That's not usually what's going on with most people right now, but it is possible. And yeah, a lot of people are put on estrogen hormones just because there's so many people who don't understand hormones, especially in the female body. So they're like, oh, you're having issues? Here's some estrogen. And then things get worse, but like they think like, well, wow, I guess it must have been really, really bad if I didn't take it, instead of like, is this doing this to me? Right? Because my doctor gave it to me. It's supposed to help, right? Oh, golly. Let's see if there's any more symptoms here. I think there is. That's why I pulled it up. So again, the one that's least looked at as for why estrogen dominance is happening is that progesterone isn't being produced enough in the body. You actually need more progesterone. A lot of work is being done on that side of things, promoting progesterone, increasing progesterone, or progesterone-only hormone replacement in order to combat estrogen dominance. Again, this is in men too. If you're a man and you have like really pernicious weight issues, if you have, I'm not finding the appropriate scientific term, so I'm going to say man boobs. If you've got, right, some of these things going on, then you might also have estrogen dominance because of the environmental weight on your endocrine system. So, yeah, breast tenderness, decreased libido, weight gain, changes to your cycle, hair loss, brittle hair, hair thinning, changes in the color of your hair. I didn't even know that. I was like, why is my hair reddish now? And it was weird because I don't know if you watched the show long enough, you remember maybe about 4 years ago or so, I did dye my hair like a reddish tint. But then also that dye was long gone, and all of a sudden my hair just had a reddish tint. So I was like, it's not possible that this dye like somehow got into my DNA and made my hair permanently red, did it? Like, because I've never had red hair before, ever. So I was just like confused. And I just so happened to, for the first time in my life, have a sort of reddish tint dyed to my hair. Like, it was just confusing timing. So I was just like, what is going on? And then I find out this is an estrogen dominance issue. All my other issues were also that. It's just, again, no one cares. And so no one like knew. And I didn't know. And again, if you went to a doctor and you're like, my hair changed colors, they'd be like, oh, you're crazy. I mean, like, they literally assume you were crazy before they treated it like a symptom and tried to figure out what was going on. In most cases, right? There's going to be doctors out there that are good, but like, whew, there's not many. Okay, so the color of your hair can change because it's crazy. Problems with fertility, changes to your mood, including depression, anxiety, not feeling like yourself, bloating in the stomach, water retention, changes to your bowel movements, reduced energy or fatigue, changes to your sleeping patterns, including insomnia. Let's actually call it like the most maddening wakefulness you've ever, because I used to have insomnia, but I'd just sit there and chill and be like, well, I'm awake. I'll just think of fun things and do stuff in my head and whatever. This is like insomnia with anger. Like, it's not fun. There's things that are not on this list. By the way, again, if you want to get like the full list of things that your body can do because of estrogen dominance, it's wild. Wild, the number of things that are just seem disparate and unconnected, but are all this one thing. Reduced or damaged metabolism, gaining weight even though you haven't changed your diet or your exercise. Other hormone imbalances, low testosterone, thyroid disease, and more. Skin issues, all sorts of things. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's insane, and there is very little done about it by many people. So again, they suggest you could take progesterone. You can try to cut out as many of those xenoestrogens as you can, as many of those disruptive chemicals, endocrine disruptors as you can. You can decrease your phytoestrogens as well from plant sources. You can get higher quality foods, organic foods. You can eat higher quality meats, so you're not getting this, secondary poisoning from the meat you're eating. You can do all of those things. And if that's enough for you, great. And if it's not, then you can take progesterone if your doctor tells you to. If your doctor will believe you, take the time to talk to you about it, figure it out with you, and then help you do it, then yeah, you can do that. You can also find progesterone other places and ways. So that also exists. Yeah. And you can also have progesterone resistance syndrome. So anyways, certain conditions may lead to a downregulated progesterone receptor in certain cells. This means it requires higher and higher levels of progesterone to have the same effect. Resistance syndromes also exist for other hormones such as insulin resistance, leptin resistance, and they occur through similar mechanisms. It's not well understood exactly how it develops, but it's suspected that high levels of estrogen probably contribute. So you can have estrogen dominance and then try to use progesterone to get the balance better off for yourself, but then that might cause also more progesterone resistance, and then you have to just get more and more progesterone. So again, we'll go back to birth control for a second. We'll say, if you could have prevented this nightmare, wouldn't you? And wouldn't you emphasize it a little bit more for people making this decision to say, like, yes, it might actually kill you in multiple different ways. One of them is cancer. One of them is blood clots. One of them is heart disease. One of them is estrogen dominance itself, which would be a long and slow and painful death. Because, by the way, estrogen dominance causes cancer too and other forms of death. So, like, do you want all that death? Or do you just maybe want to go a different route in order to not have a baby? Maybe. And again, I know there's some people who take some hormones for other reasons, but we're talking about birth control here. So moving on, you can also have a tubal ligation. Again, I eventually had one. I felt great about it. It was a quick, easy surgery. It was free because the eugenicists love Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood loves to give out as many tubal ligations as it can. So I had a free tubal ligation. And, so your fallopian tubes are sliced up. They're like, oh, we just cut it once. And my guy was like, oh, I cut it 7 times on each side. I was like, damn, like that guy hates me, I think. I think that guy hates me. I think he was really glad to take me out of the gene pool. Something like that must have been going on. 7 times on each side is a bit much, but he seemed excited about it. We got a lot of psychopaths in surgeon profession, right? So that's what tubal ligation is. And so now the egg can't, the egg still is created by the ovaries, is still dispersed by the ovaries. It just doesn't go down the tube. It doesn't get to the uterus. You can't get pregnant. The risks I was told was just ectopic pregnancy, basically it, and that if I ever wanted to try to have a baby, I would have to try to replace my tubes that had been cut up 7 times too many, and that was it. And it turns out there's like a little bit more going on than that. It says tubal ligation does not generally lead to hormone imbalance, but some women do experience hormonal abnormalities post-procedure. It says science does not fully yet understand the mechanism behind why that occurs, but they are starting to acknowledge that it does occur. It says one possible explanation is that tubal ligation may restrict blood supply to the ovaries, resulting in post-tubal ligation syndrome, they're calling it now. Never heard of this. Have tubal ligation. Again, yet another, what I thought was a better choice because I wasn't continuing to put chemicals or hormones or whatever into my body, right? I thought it was better, and yet here's this post-tubal ligation syndrome. A state of hormonal imbalance in the body mainly due to estrogen dominance. Oh, look, another thing that contributes to estrogen dominance. It turns out there is no birth control method that man created that doesn't seem to lead directly to estrogen dominance, which is a deadly situation to be in. It might just be mildly annoying, or it might kill you. You just don't know. You can just destroy your life. Here's Tinfoil Tiara on YouTube saying, my periods became awful and painful after my tubal ligation. I don't know if I did or not, because I didn't like connect. I just didn't think it was even possible, so I wouldn't have connected it, you know? I'm glad you noticed. I'm sorry that happened to you. And yeah, I'm hearing these types of things more and more. There's nobody's all these people, are these people being told now? Now when you go in for a tubal ligation, are they like, by the way, this can permanently mess up your endocrine system forever, irreversible, which can lead to death. Do you still want to do this? It's like, be real with people, right? Informed decisions. It can trigger hot flashes, mood swings, fatigue, among others. It's believed that the procedure may disrupt or damage the messaging system between the cells in the fallopian tubes and hormones, leading to miscommunication and imbalances. Oh my God. Yeah, why wouldn't it? This is all one system here, one connected system here. What you do to it affects everything in the system. Holistic. We have to look at the whole person more and more and more. And this type of thing doesn't fit that worldview. You wouldn't cut up your fallopian tubes if you really understood your body and yourself. So, there are things that you can do to help any of this. And like we've said already, it's cutting out all of those estrogen or endocrine disruptors. It's eating really high quality, really nutrient dense food, exercising, of course. This is not the type of exercising where you're just running yourself ragged, hoping to burn fat. It's the type of exercise where you're just focused on moving your body and sweating and feeling good about it. That type of exercising, stress relief techniques, meditation, yoga. Alternative medicine also suggests various supplements, especially B vitamins, calcium, selenium, things that help your metabolism, things that help detoxing. So all of the things that I've been talking about for the last handful of years, the ways that I have used to save my own life because doctors wouldn't, those are all highly recommended. And I'll summarize them very briefly again here by saying what you're essentially always trying to do, no matter your condition, is you're trying to increase your nutrient density. You're trying to decrease your toxin load coming in, and you're trying to increase your toxin release pathways. So especially including pooping, peeing, sweating, crying. Those are your toxin release pathways. Anything that comes out of your body has the potential to carry toxins out with it. So if you are eating really healthy and really good and de-stressing and doing all this stuff, your body's going to start releasing toxins that it had built up, and it's going to come out in those ways. So if you increase your bowel movements to a reasonable amount, if you increase your healthy release of urine and sweat, then you're doing good for releasing toxins. So those are all good ways to do that. Oil pulling is another way. It's not just for oral health, it's for releasing toxins through your mouth. So you can do all of that sort of stuff as well. I am not a medical doctor, and I'm not giving you medical advice. So you can also have prescription medications, usually hormone replacement treatments, which are, again, giving you the hormones that you are lacking or missing. And, they're helpful. And they also, again, kind of keep you in this state where like, you're probably going to need that for the rest of your life then. Possibly not. Possibly you get to a place where you're such in a healthy place and you have so few toxins left in your system, in your world, and all of this is great and you can like get off of them, and that'd be awesome. It's not always how it tends to go. So even tubal ligation causes hormonal dysregulation. Yeah, Natalie in the chat says some of her hairs individually turn black. We're talking about hair color changes. Hair too. Hair can grow. So your hair on your head will just like fall out and get brittle, but then you'll like grow hair everywhere else. And everyone just laughs like, oh, ha, ha, it's getting old. Like, no, it's extreme endocrine disruption. You shouldn't be having this problem when you're any age really until maybe like 80. Your body's like finally supposed to start actually breaking down. Dear God. So vasectomies now, let's get to men. Men also have all the same dangers we talked about. They're still in the same endocrine disruption system. They still have all the same toxins and all of that. So men are not off the hook with this. They often have less troubles until, again, they're older as well. They didn't take all the birth control when they were young, so they don't have those types of issues. But as they get older, their body starts to also kind of buckle under the weight of all of this endocrine disruption. And so a lot of men suffer with low testosterone, which is also estrogen dominance. Often. So men have to then deal with this same problem. Well, it turns out their birth control methods, the few they have, can also be disruptive. So people, and I said this too, again, when I was a leftist, I was like, well, all men should just get vasectomies because it's easy for them and it's reversible and it's safe and it's blah, blah, blah. Again, female privilege to the core, like just not even thoughtful at all. No, it's not just safe and it's not just easy and it's not always reversible. And it also comes with hormonal issues as well. So like, how rude, right? Poor men. Poor men. So, again, they're always minimizing it. They're like, the side effects are small. The side effects are rare. They're not that small and they're not that rare. The most common ones are just pain, discomfort, inflammation of the skin in that area, and surgical site infection is possible. And so those are sort of the obvious ones. In any surgery, you can die. And this doesn't just have to do with anesthesiology. It is also just true because you are in one of the most highly potential for the strongest bacterial strains you can find. You're in that setting. That's where hospitals, this is where we find like C. diff and all of these really, I'm totally blanking on the one that is like the worst that people have to spend like months in the hospital for. Maybe one of you will mention it in the chat so I can remember. But, these types of infections that are so severe, they're in hospitals. That's where we breed them. So if you go into a hospital and something is going to go into your skin, your protective layer, then you have the potential that it's going to introduce these strains that are highly pathogenic of bacteria, especially. I keep trying to think SARS, but that's not it, but it's MRSA. MRSA is what I'm thinking of. You get MRSA at hospitals for the most part. Not always, but most of the time, right? You get C. diff at hospitals. Not always, but most of the time. You get these infections there because that's where we breed them. So even if you're going in and it's just a quick surgery, in and out, inpatient or outpatient surgery, you can still get, sepsis and other infections. Yeah, MRSA, MRSA, thank you. So like, do you want to take that risk? I always am amazed lately at how many people are just like, yeah, it's just a surgery. I'll just do the surgery. I'll just do. I'm like, no matter how small the surgery, the chance of death exists. If you don't have to do that, do you want to do it? And this especially blows my mind in these surgeries where they're like, the outcome is already, if you look at the studies, very low that you will have any relief. Back surgeries are notorious for this. They're like, oh, let's do this back surgery. And people are like, oh, I'm in so much pain. I'm going to get this back surgery. And I'm always like, did you read the literature? Because some of them, this is literally the outcome. They're like 15% of people got better. 40% of people had no change. And then the other 40% of people got worse. So you're telling me you have something like an 80% chance of either staying exactly the same or getting worse, but you're going to go do that surgery. That's insane. Vasectomy, not quite on that scale, but still a surgery we could avoid easily. And it's always a risk to have any surgery. But it turns out vasectomies also have some other pretty horrible side effects, potentially. Epididymitis is the most common, they're saying like non-severe side effect. And this is, the epididymis is a duct located behind the testicles. It allows sperm to flow through the vas deferens. When a man has a vasectomy, the sperm can still flow from the epididymis to the vas deferens, but becomes backed up because the vas deferens has been cut. In some men, this can cause inflammation of the gland or epididymitis. So because it gets backed up and cannot flow as easily, you can get this painful chronic condition. Vasovenous fistula. A vasovenous fistula is a very rare complication of vasectomy. This condition occurs when multiple blood vessels adhere to the vas deferens that then becomes injured when a man has a vasectomy. This can result in the pooling of the blood that leads to the development of a fistula or abnormal connection between the vas deferens and nearby blood vessels. Symptoms of a vasovenous fistula may include blood in urine or ejaculate. Oh, God. They're like, it's very rare, but seek attention if it happens. And I'm like, it's rare, but it happens. Again, if you could potentially get these infections, can potentially die, potentially have this type of effect, and you don't need it, is this a good choice? Sperm granuloma. A sperm granuloma is a lump of sperm that can cause small bumps or cysts that range from 1 millimeter to 1 centimeter in size. A person can experience multiple lesions. They don't usually cause any symptoms. However, for some men may have pain at the granuloma area. So just bumpy granules that are just there permanently. Pain and discomfort, these things, swelling, or it could just fail. So again, not quite as bad as some of the female. I would actually ask, though, how much of this hormonal side effects for men have never been studied, right? Is there a testosterone impact, just like there seems to be for women in a similar sort of procedure? The tubal ligation, is there an effect on men's hormones from this procedure, especially longitudinally, long term? Maybe. I don't know that we know. I don't know that anyone cares. Again, they're just like, who cares? Just stop having kids and just like take all this crap and ruin your lives. So I also wanted to say, you know, there is this IUD that is just copper. There's no hormones in it. This is the only form of birth control I can find that has seemingly no hormonal side effects. However, even the pure copper IUD, which is the one that I had for a short time, in my case, for example, it caused 3 different concurrent infections. And I don't even remember now exactly what was going on, but it was like a parasitic, a viral, and like a bacterial or something. I was just like, how did it do all of it at once? And I thought copper was supposed to kill everything. So like, how did this even happen? It is potentially possible that the people who put it in actually put in the exact same IUD that my body had just spit out and rejected. They placed an IUD and my body spit it out instantly. And they said, whoa, that's weird. And then they put what I thought was another one, but maybe it was the same one, back in, which would have introduced all of that into my system and caused these infections. So it's not necessarily the IUD's fault. Here again, though, we see like this is a pretty severe outcome. I had to go to the emergency room. I had complications for a little while. Potentially that affected my ability to have kids. Potentially, you know, all of these other things could have happened. There's also people who don't have that, but do have scarring on the inside of their uterus from their IUD. And so they do have long-term infertility issues. IUD placement in itself is risky. It can cause damage. It's a physical object you're putting into a part of your body that isn't supposed to have a physical object in it, right? So all of that is potential. Copper is pretty good at killing sperm. Some people have said, folklore, folk medicine, whatever, has said that if you just place copper in your vaginal canal while you're having sex, you just won't get pregnant. I don't know. I wasn't able to find any evidence of this, but I don't know if you heard that myth or that potential myth or not. So no hormonal side effects. It's reversible, etc. It is, if you were going to be sort of like forced to choose one, it might be the copper IUD. It might be the way to go out of all of these options. Condoms and copper IUDs might be like the least potential for harming you, right? Expulsion. See, what's that happened to me? So yeah, you still might have heavier bleeding, heavier cramps, spotting between periods, and some other things. It's not clear that that's hormonal, though. It might be literally your body's like, why is this thing in me? Can we get this out now? Like, you know, because no matter what, if you have a foreign object in your body, it's basically always angry. So that's a copper IUD, worth touching on, still some risks. And then we'll get to abortion. Unfortunately, this is a birth control option for many. And I get really sick of the people who pretend it's not, because out of all of my friends group, I had a lot of pretty loose women in my friends group. And out of all of the people in my friends group, there were many of them who had multiple abortions. And abortion was absolutely a birth control option for them. It was preferable to them to taking hormones, to trying to remember to pill, to try to, you know, using a condom. It doesn't feel as good. All of those things were not their choice. And so instead, they relied on abortion. I know people who have had 10 abortions, for example, just at last count that I knew them, which was a long time ago. So when people are like, oh, that's rare, that was a small friend group in a small town in the middle of nowhere. No, it's not rare at all. In fact, when you look into the numbers of abortion rates, the vast majority of people's reasoning for getting an abortion is just that they got pregnant. Very rarely is it that they were raped. Very rarely is it that there was incest or something else going on. Very rarely is it like a severe actual complication of pregnancy. The vast majority of abortions are people who just got pregnant while having sex and don't want a baby. And I don't care, right? That's fine. Cool. Go have your abortion. Well, this has risks too. And I also had an abortion. And so that was another form of birth control that I tried. And I hated it. And I hated what happened to me afterwards. And I still went on as a very severe leftist to say, like, I loved my abortion. It was great because in my head, I had saved my career. I had saved my life. And I'll be really fair to myself. I literally got pregnant while using a condom on my period. So like, that's not even likely. Like that should never have happened. So, I definitely was not the person who relied on abortions. I definitely never thought I would get one. And then I found myself in that situation and it seemed like the best choice to me. And so I was like, yeah, I loved my abortion. It was great. Well, the truth is I didn't love it. The truth is it was not a good experience. The truth is I felt emotionally conflicted about it, even at the time, but I had to present outwardly as though I loved it because that was the culture I was in and that was what I felt comfortable with and that's what I thought I meant, right? And actually it wasn't true. And my periods after my abortion were insane. They don't even warn you. No one even warned me. I didn't go to school for handfuls of days every month for a while. I was in college at the time. I didn't go to work or school for those days because I couldn't get out of the bathroom. I was in agonizing pain and I was practically hemorrhaging. And no one warned me at all. And maybe I'm stupid, right? Maybe I should have researched it much more heavily, but I would have thought they'd say hey, by the way, for a couple of months, it might be really brutal. Take these days off around this, or whatever. We're here for you or nothing. Just nothing. Just okay, bye. Now we have your baby's tissue for our purposes. So I'm not glad. I'm not glad I had an abortion. And I do know that people use this as birth control because I've lived that and I've seen that and I know them. And yeah, they have some negative effects of abortions, but it's hard to study. And this is similar to studying hormones, but it's even worse with abortion because you can't make people have abortions or not, right? You get if you were going to do a gold standard of a study, you'd have to be okay, all these pregnant people, you all are going to have abortions and you all are not, and you all aren't going to know if you did or didn't. That's not even possible. So you can't really have a really good study. And it's highly politicized. So it's also very difficult, right? And it's highly sociologically influenced. So it's hard. Again, if you asked me right at the time, I'd be like, hell yeah, it was the best thing I ever did. And you ask me now and I'm like, no, it was awful actually. Right. But I just didn't know myself and I was in a certain culture and whatever. So we also have those sorts of factors. Well, it turns out even through all of that, we can tell that depression is a high correlate. It's a highly likely outcome of having an abortion is depression. Depression meaning actual depression, severe depression, where it affects your life, where you're not able to function for a time, if not for a very long time, that's a likely outcome. That's enough, right? That's enough to say whoa, maybe just think about this outcome that your life itself may seem not worth living for who knows how long. It's a pretty big deal, actually. Right? And they're yeah, but that's social. People only get depressed because their church groups tell them they're bad people. You just ripped something out of a woman's uterus. We know that there's hormonal and all sorts of things connected with this. You can't tell me it's just social. I was depressed and I didn't have any of that influence. I only had people around me who thought abortion was great. And I still had it just doesn't seem likely to me that it's just socially influenced. You can have guilt, anger, shame, remorse, regret, loss of self-esteem, loss of self-confidence, feelings of isolation and loneliness, sleep problems, nightmares, relationship problems, thoughts of suicide. Yeah. And again, you can try to pretend that's just social. I think there's a bigger thing going on. I think women and their uteruses are pretty close. They're pretty tight. And when there's a living being inside of your uterus, that's a big deal for anyone. Even if you can't connect to it in that moment, even if you can't admit it to yourself in that moment, I think that's true. So, depression at least. But they also have done some studies, and they've done their best to try to gather, like, are there actual effects on people from getting abortions? Otherwise, are there physical effects? Are there, right? Like, what else is going on? And they have actually found that it can impact your future ability to have children. They do tell you this. They did say this to me. They said, by the way, this and your blood type both what could cause you to not be able to carry a child to term in the future. And I was like, who cares? I'm never having babies. Like, then I got my tubes tied, so whatever. But, that is true. You could have secondary infertility, ectopic pregnancy, spontaneous abortion, stillbirth, complications of pregnancies, preterm birth, small for gestational age, and low birth weight from having had a previous abortion. The risk of breast cancer goes up. Again, this is probably because of your estrogen, your endocrine system, your hormones get somehow affected, just like in tubal ligation, even though it doesn't seem like it technically should. Isn't that what we always find out about the body? We're like, oh, that's crazy. We didn't expect that. Hundreds of years later, after studying the body, like, yeah, we're a miracle and a mystery. Like, we don't still understand the whole and how it works together. So, of course, we're going to find things like this as we go. Mental health disorders and premature death or suicide. So these are just some things that are indicated as possibly at least influenced by abortion. So abortion too, as a form of birth control, also has possible lifelong or deadly impacts on you. Pelvic infection is possible. Incomplete abortion can happen. Blood clots in the uterus, heavy bleeding, cut or torn cervix, perforation of the uterus wall, anesthesia-related complications, Rh immunoglobulin therapy. If you have, that was there what you're talking about with my blood factor thing. And then emotional issues as well. And this is just from Louisiana's Department of Health, a women's right to know. Some of the possible risks of abortion are supported by science. And then we get to this other option of birth control, which is almost never talked about, taught, or practiced, even though it is actually the best one of all, and it's very, very obviously so. And this is abstinence, which just means not having sex until you're going to get married. And I have done nothing but talk shit about this option, and so do a lot of people. And it's kind of like a black pill thing. It's kind of like a fake edgy thing to be like, oh yeah, you're gonna wait till you get married, like, right? And like, this culture does not value this at all. That's actually changing. That's actually changing, and it's changing in such an amazing way. I'm so shocked to find that young people are starting to choose things like this because they feel like it's healthier for them. Like, I'm like, whoa, where did you guys come from? Like, we need you. Thank you for being here. This article is from Psychology Today, and it said, did a study really show that abstinence before marriage makes for better sex afterwards? Yes, it did. He says, wait until marriage to have sex, and it will be the best sex you've ever had, which sounds dumb, but it also sounds obviously true. It's the only sex you've ever had. You will love it. If you ruin it ahead of time with sex with a bunch of random people, and you've got all of these really shallow ideas of what sex is because you've mostly had sex in shallow experiences, which is what you will have done if you have sex with a lot of people, then you have all of these ideas about sex that are not real, and they're not real intimacy. I will be the person who says, I don't believe you that you enjoyed a lot of sex that you had before marriage. I don't believe you that it was somehow fulfilling. I don't believe you that it was intimate. I don't believe you. I believe that it was indulgent. I believe that it was emotionally inappropriate. I believe that it probably harmed you and the other in ways that you haven't even acknowledged to yourself yet. And that if you wait and you actually are deeply in love with someone, I hope that you have been deeply in love with someone and you've experienced this type of sex, because it is different from any other sex you've ever had. And again, unfortunately, I did have premarital sex, and I'm not even technically married, but I am basically married. I'm with my soulmate, and that sex is different. Ineffably. You can't actually even express to people what it is they are never going to understand until they find that and do that. But you can't practice it. You can't and there's no point to it, because when you actually get to the point where you are that deeply in love and actually loving and actually intimate with someone on the deepest possible levels of human potential, everything will be different. You can't even explain it. You don't even understand it until you get there. And then all of a sudden, it's this all-encompassing, engrossing experience that you've never had anything even similar to. And especially if you've been damaged by porn or porn addiction, then unfortunately, it's a lot harder to get there. It's a lot harder to get to that point where this is actually the thing you enjoy most. And then you are actually able to be intimate and present with someone at that level. And if your hormones are all messed up, you're not even going to find a partner that basically suits you, because you're going to be looking for things that aren't actually what you want because your hormones are saying so. So it's crazy. So your best chance at a happy life is to not have any hormones in you at all, no birth control at all, none of the options, and then find someone you're deeply in love with, and then get married to them, and then have sex with only them. Now you are the most likely to have a happy, lifelong, lasting, stable, deeply soul fulfilling relationship. And nobody taught you that. Maybe your parents did, or your group, or nobody even came close. They said that, right? In sex ed, they were like, abstinence is the best choice. And everyone was like, yeah, but we're not going to do that. And we don't believe you. And you don't even actually go deeply into why it might be. They just say, like, it is. It's the safest. It's the only way to say you're never going to get pregnant. You're not going to get any diseases. And we're like, well, technically that's true, but we want to have sex. So what now? And they're like, okay, now here's some condoms, and here's some birth control, and here's this and that. But if you would have actually got down on this level and been like, look, love actually exists. Whatever we call soulmates, like, that's a real thing you can develop. You can find that in life. You can create this. You can actually have the happiest relationship and feel so deeply fulfilled and loved and safe with somebody. And then you can have the best sex of your life with that person. And that is less likely if you go do all this other bullshit. Can somebody get real about it, please? Can we just tell people this, please? Can this be sex ed, please, where you actually have people go into that instead of just the sterile, you're less likely to have a baby? Or can parents, can you get on this shit? So 70 to 90% of adolescents have sex by the age of 18. That doesn't surprise me at all. That would be what I would have guessed. Most dating couples have sex within the first month of dating. Adolescents who pledge themselves to virginity do not differ from closely matched peers in whether they have had sex 5 years later. Although by then, most who pledge virginity deny that they ever made such a pledge. Because it's not cool. We do not have a culture that says it's cool to not have sex. That is why I had sex at a young age. I remember the thought process. I wrote about it in my diary. I could pull out my diary and show you the sad, sad tale of Lindsay going, everybody's having sex. I think I need to have sex. Or what am I going to do? I'm just going to be left behind. I haven't even kissed anyone. I better find someone to kiss and then have sex with. Literally. Oh my God, poor little baby Lindsay. Why? But this is how our culture is. It is cool to have sex. It is cool to smoke cigarettes. It's cool to do drugs. It is not cool to do anything else. So everybody else is a square and a loser and whatever. Nobody technically peer pressured me, but technically peer pressure is just culture, right? But delaying sex is credited for making marriages stronger. And this is actually studied and is actually found, and it's amazing. And mostly you find this in Mormon and religious and Christian and highly structured subcultures. And that's it. But man, wouldn't you want those kids? Wouldn't you want the kids who were so happy and didn't have all these health issues? Yeah, I would. And, kids who are raised by adults who really are passionate about this stuff and well-informed about it and also live it, they tend to follow it because it's actually not, the peer pressure and culture can't actually take over the adoration and respect that you have for a parent who is especially a good, solid parent for you, right? You can't replace that. So you can actually create this intentionally in your children. And again, the healthier you are, the more you're living it and showing it rather than saying it, like the better that goes, right? But you're pointing it out and saying it as well. Oh, and National Marriage Week is apparently right now, headed into Valentine's Day here, appropriate timing. So they're highlighting on this page of Explore the Facts About Fertility, summary of a 2021 article published, which concluded that couples who used natural family planning methods had improved self-esteem, stronger marriages, and lower divorce rates than those who relied on sterilization or contraception. So again, this is like within marriage itself. If you're like, we don't really want kids right now, let's do this. If you choose natural methods, natural family planning, which is also referred to as fertility awareness-based methods, which involves monitoring women's biological markers of fertility to predict times of fertility and infertility, as well as observe overall ovulation health, right? Then you have all of these improved outcomes of your relationship itself, rather than all of these methods, which will slowly destroy you and your relationships and your life. This is like, it seems again like this is the most obvious choice, actually. I have people in my life who I won't like name. I don't want to call them out, but this is their method. They're like, we're not technically trying to or not have a baby. We're just somewhat aware of like what we're doing. And we, if we get pregnant, we'll be pregnant. And if we don't, we won't, and they are happy. And they are all of these things. They do have high self-esteem and they do have a high level of trust and bond between each other, right? So 60 to 85% of respondents, both men and women across all studies, consistently perceived that the practice of periodic abstinence and NFP helped their marriage despite acknowledging the occasional difficulties. The idea of a shared responsibility helped improve their overall impression of the marriage. 74% of couples expressed satisfaction with this method. They also reported higher levels of self-esteem, spiritual well-being compared to couples not using these methods. It just makes sense to me too, though, right? If it's not necessarily like if you do it this way, you're good. If you do it this way, you're bad. But if you just look at the trend itself, right? And what it says to say to yourself, you and your partner to say like, you know what? I'm just going to take this pill that has all these side effects and I'm just going to do that. Well, now you're the only one doing it. You're the one that's suffering the effects of it. There's just already some distance there. It's also this culture of like, just take a pill and forget about it. Don't even think about your actual health or, what you might need. It's just a totally different vibe than saying like, hey, let's work together. Let's like plan this. Let's like be together on this. We'll both be therefore taking the responsibility. I mean, that's just a different energy. So of course it would increase your intimacy. They say here they actually had more sex because you're very aware. You're like, right, for this time period, we're not going to have sex. So let's have sex otherwise. So like, and sex, believe it or not, is actually one of the predictors of a happy relationship. If you continue to have sex with your partner on a regular basis, this is a good predictor. It goes back and forth on like how much. I don't even think that really matters. It's just like you do have desire for one another and you do find times to be intimate, like you're good. But they had more sex. So it's very interesting. So, these are, again, the things you're not really told, you don't really encouraged to think about, in my opinion. And that's because it doesn't fit the psychopathic eugenicist worldview. And it doesn't fit the sort of culture that's been created by those same forces. Right. And so the opposite then, if you wanted to like rebel against the eugenicist psychopaths who want you to die, you would look more towards things like, celibacy. That's not the right word, but waiting till marriage, natural methods of birth control that you can use with your partner instead of chemical or hormonal. This is also the idea. I just had this up to remind myself. This is a study on desired abstinent and non-abstinent recovery outcomes among people who use methamphetamines. But the idea is that like it's interesting to use abstinence in any area of our lives. So if you do have to delay your gratification for something, this is a level of self mastery that does inspire confidence. It does inspire self-esteem. It does actually create habits that can pay off in other areas of your life. And it's a level of self-care and self-love to put off something that you do really want, right? Which could be meth. It could be meth. It could be sex. It could be chocolate. It could be so many things, but you say, you know what? I know it's better for me not to, and I'm going to choose not to. And then you experience the success of having chosen not to do something like that. And you have all of these increased outcomes. So this study is actually about that in part. And also about whether or not you can use a little bit of meth and still be clean and whatever, there's some other things going on here. But it's a good point. And we come back to this marshmallow experiment. I've talked about this so many times. As a teacher, I would also teach this to my students, because the marshmallow experiment talks about that exact thing. Like, can you abstain from something in order to give yourself a higher payoff later? Right? This is like a human quality we can develop. It's a human skill we can develop in ourselves, and it matters immensely. It turns out with this marshmallow experiment, what they basically do is they give a marshmallow to a child in a little room and they say, right, I'm going to come back. And in this case, they say 15 minutes. I thought it was, I'm just going to come back at some point. You don't know when, but let's just say 15 minutes. For a kid, 15 minutes is like 12 hours. Come on. So I'm going to come back in 15 minutes. These kids, by the way, are like 4 or 5 little kids, preschool kids. So 4 or 5-year-old kid in a room. I'm going to give you this marshmallow. I'm going to leave. I'm going to come back in 15 minutes. If I come back and that marshmallow is still there, I'll give you another one. So you'll get 2 marshmallows. If I come back and it's gone, you don't get another marshmallow. That's it. You're not in trouble. There's nothing wrong. Nobody's going to be mad at you. You eat it or you don't. But if it's still there, like, I'll give you another marshmallow. You can see the videos of these kids doing this experiment, and it's so awesome. They're just like doing everything they can, and they're just like reaching out, touching it, and then licking their finger and like trying not to eat this marshmallow. Again, it's a child. It's like a 4-year-old kid. So the kids who didn't eat the marshmallow, that is the best predictor of lifelong success. When they follow these kids longitudinally, they have higher grades, they have less, drugs, alcohol, like these sorts of behaviors that are self-harming. They have higher likelihood of having good jobs and all of this college and everything, and it just goes out and out forever. And the kids who ate the marshmallow, it's the biggest predictor of failure in all those same areas. More likely to get lower grades, drop out of school, do drugs, be in crime, all of this stuff, not go to college, not get good jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a perfect predictor, but it is a super high likelihood, very high predictor. And it's because these kids have the ability to abstain. They have the ability to put off gratification, delayed gratification. This is a skill that actually determines success in life. So to help our children get to the point where they can say, you know what, sex is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. It feels pretty good, but I'm going to not do it because I understand the benefits of it, can also make them successful in all of these other ways. How fascinating is that? Of course, they do have to say socioeconomic status has a higher predictor than the marshmallow experiment. And that is true. Kids from poor, broken families are most likely to fail in all those ways. And kids from affluent, whole families, situations that are stable in any way are more likely to succeed. So you have to control for that first for this to then happen, but it still matters. It's still a very high predictor. And hopefully we are also finding ways to make sure children can less and less experience low socioeconomic status and this type of disruption in their lives. That is obvious. And otherwise, we want to help them learn how to abstain. That is should be one of our highest goals. And I love this. I've been reading Chesterton lately, and Chesterton is one of the most beautiful minds I've ever encountered in my life. Dear God, I just like 100% of what he says. I'm like, I feel like I wrote this, not because he writes very differently from me. His style is very different from my style as an author. But just the ideas, like what he's saying, I'm like, it's so uncanny. Like, I just feel like I am this man. I feel like he is me. I feel like we're the same person. He's speaking to me. But here's one of his quotes, right? Chesterton says, the most extraordinary thing in the world is an ordinary man and an ordinary woman and their ordinary children. And it's true. And he's highlighting that, like, you can go all the way out to the cosmos. You can get up to the level of like God if you're a spiritual person. And you can say like, wow, this is really amazing. You can get all the way down to the level of the atom and all this stuff. You can go out into the political world, to the social world, and you can see all of these things. But what really matters in life is this. It's the family, actually. In fact, this is like biologically the reason we exist as a race, as a species. It's also, you know, he goes on to argue many things about this, but it's connected to the success of the state. If you don't have a successful family and a series of successful families, you don't have a successful state or nation or grouping of any kind, of any name you want to give it politically, county, it doesn't matter. But that can't be healthy without healthy families to make it up. You know, and there's a lot of people that would say like, this is unfair, and there's gay people and there's trans people and there's all this stuff. Sure. Well, you're not making families, so you're not part of this discussion, are you? So bringing it back to the family, this is the thing that keeps the race going. That is the thing that keeps the world going. It is the reason you exist. This is the purpose at the basis level of why people exist. So he's right, right? He's right. So shouldn't we want the highest opportunity for each family to be the highest expression of itself? Well, it comes back to this, apparently. Did you take birth control? Like, that affects all of it. This has the ability to destroy nations, actually. Right? I mean, like, oh, you're taking it here. I'm taking it here because this is also what the psychopath class knows. It is also what eugenicists know. And it's also part of why Planned Parenthood was pushed and all of these birth control methods were pushed. It's also because we are a people who have been in a culture that, you know, values the quick fix instead of the abstaining and the confidence building and the self-esteem building and the efficacy building, right? That's also true. But the two things go hand in hand. They're not accidentally correlated. They're very much connected. Chesterton also says the triangle of truisms of father, mother, and child cannot be destroyed. It can only destroy those civilizations which disregard it. And this has been a primary attack of the psychopath class on every other class of people in this world, is the attack on the family. I mean, like, what hasn't been attacked about the family? Getting women to leave their family and go have jobs instead, getting families to farm their kids out to a public school to indoctrinate them instead of guiding them and teaching them themselves, getting a TV to replace the culture that would have been passed down through a family with whatever garbage comes through the media and whatnot. I mean, this is all destroying the family. And as we can see, our society and culture hasn't done so well under all of that pressure. People haven't done so well under all of that pressure. Turns out people actually need a stable family in which to grow in order to become their highest self. Again, if we go back to the marshmallow test, they had to first control for that. And then they could find out how much self-restraint has to do with success. So it matters deeply to the whole world, in fact, if the family is intact or not. But we'll go back for a second to estrogen. I wanted to not just focus on the attacks on us, not just focus on all of the problems that are happening, but I wanted to give you some really actionable things that you can use to, again, men or women can use these methods I'm about to say, because none of them are going to harm you. And they're also going to very likely bring down your estrogen, since you may likely be in an estrogen dominant situation, man or women. So this is from Veronica on Twitter. She is at Celestial Being. The I in being is a number 1. I have talked about her before. She does really fantastic work in helping people get back to metabolic health, especially people who have, again, thyroid or hormonal disorders, but also any people, again, man or women or otherwise. So these are her best tried and true ways for lowering estrogen. She says, even right here, these tips will help men as well. So daily raw carrot salad, she says, raw carrot salad. You shred the carrot with coconut oil, vinegar, and salt. I'll tell you, she has also said that she puts sugar on this sometimes, or honey on it sometimes as well. This is not a low-carb diet. Low-carb diets are not good for bringing down estrogen. Vitamin E, she suggests. Red light therapy, sunlight or sunbeds. Gelatinous oxtail broth. She tells you how to make it. You can also just make bone broth, but oxtail is supposedly even higher in collagen and glycine and some of these really good things. So either way, if you want to go for oxtail, go for it. But at the very least, I'll just say you can do bone broth too. And that's really good. Chamomile tea for the apigenin. Bioidentical progesterone. You can find Progest E complex in some places. You can find also other bioidentical progesterones. You can also find some bioidentical progesterone powders for your, therefore, they are technically for your makeup. Technically, I couldn't, for example, tell you that you could take them into your body, and neither can the people who sell them to you. They are not allowed to tell you that because that would make them a drug, and otherwise you'd need a prescription. So I will not tell you to do that. Progesterone, bioidentical progesterone. Make sure it's bioidentical progesterone and not progestin. Progestin is not as effective and also has other side effects. Bioidentical progesterone would not have. More salt, she says, more than you think. And I've found this for myself as well. I actually need a high amount of salt. I'm actually drinking right now water that has been distilled, purified, bubbled, electrically hydrogen expanded, and has very high amounts of salt in it. Not just a sprinkle, which is cool. It's good to get your trace minerals that way. This has a lot of salt in it. Again, probably more than you think. Not quite as much as a saltwater flush. So you have too much salt, it'll just go right through you. That can be helpful for intestinal issues, but you don't want to go that far. But you might need more salt than you think. I get to the point now where the salt just tastes sweet to me because I'm so used to having such high levels of salt in my water. You can use LMNT. That's an Element. It's a brand. They have flavored salt with other sorts of minerals in it. That I like that. You can go to the rogueways.org favorite things tab actually and use my link, and then I'll get a few free packets myself if you end up buying some. That's not why I tell you to do that. I just like it and I use it. And so I suggest it to people. And it would be nice if I got some for free too. That's cool. So if you want to do that, you can go to rogueways.org to the favorite things tab, find the Element and click on that and grab your favorite flavor. If you're trying to avoid citric acid, then just look, some of their flavors have it and some don't. So don't, they have some without if you're trying to do that. You can also just put salt in your water. Like you could just get a high quality salt and just put some in your water, like a teaspoon or more, a couple teaspoons. Selenium and zinc, oysters and lean seafood have high amounts of these. So you can get more of it by eating that. Orange marmalade, she said, and orange juice for naringenin. Methylene blue, I use methylene blue every day. Aspirin, I now do aspirin every day for its estrogen lowering capabilities. Fat soluble vitamins, full fat milk. I get raw milk. If you have raw milk people around you, you might want to try raw milk. Eggs, I raise my own chicken, so I have these farm fresh, free range, organic, high quality eggs. They're so delicious. Butter, again, full fat butter, real butter. Again, ideally, if you can get it raw, cool, great. Coconut oil is also very good. Calcium from dairy, from pearl powder she uses. Calcium carbonate as well. She says you should be getting 1,500 milligrams per day from these sources. B vitamins, thiamine, niacinamide, riboflavin. You can also get just a general B that's a really high quality whole food B and get it that way. Again, I would take it with the methylene blue because if you're someone who needs methyl donation in your system, you have the methyl gene mutation, then you might want to do those together. Milky coffee, she says, with honey or sugar and collagen throughout the day. Coffee gets cut out a lot. I quit coffee and I started having even more migraines and issues, and I didn't get why. And now I understand it's because coffee has an estrogen lowering effect. So even though there's some reasons not to have coffee, I'm okay with coffee now. I just do coffee because I know it's helping my body in other ways. And my raw milk goes right in it. She says, avoid endocrine disruptors in skincare, personal care, and household products. We already talked about that. Avoid difficult to digest foods like raw or undercooked veggies, starches, grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes. In fact, if you want, you can just cut most of those things out, actually, and get your carbs elsewhere and all your other nutrients that you would need elsewhere. So don't do it because I said so, but look into it. It's an interesting way to do it. And especially if you have, again, endocrine or metabolic issues, which is most people, or if you have high estrogen issues, which is probably most people, this is actually perhaps the better way to go than some of these other things that are very popular right now for reasons that I stated earlier. Avoid soy products, avoid polyunsaturated fats. Those are the seed oils and all of the bad fats that have been really high in our diets lately in the past 20, 30, 40 years or so. And avoid pesticides. Go organic, or filter your water, and don't have BPA. And this is just a short list, I'll say. This is just what she's saying. Like, if you want to go hard all of a sudden on this, like, do all these things. But there's a bunch of other ways to reduce your estrogen to increase your endocrine system's health and your metabolic health. I'm going to add to this list. My infrared sauna is a must. And so that's something I try to do as often as possible too. And that also, again, increases our detox, our toxic release. But it's also good for hormonal situations. So very interesting. And this is just a quote. It's just true. To control your hormones is to control your life. This may be one of the main reasons why there's so much controlling of your hormones going on, and why you may want to take those reins back and say, no, my body is mine, my hormones are mine, and I'm going to do with them what I wish. And I'll say also, Ray Peat is probably someone you might want to look into as well for a totally different way to look at food, what your body needs, especially if you're someone who has pernicious weight gain or the inability to lose weight seemingly, or any sorts of these thyroid or hormone or endocrine system disorders or metabolic disorders. Very, very underrated, under talked about, and not a popular dietary fad, and totally the opposite of many of the things we've been being taught for some time now, including in the alternative community. So I might do a whole show where I dive much deeper into Ray Peat, but all of the things that person who I was just reading from, Veronica on Twitter, she is a Ray Peat follower. And so she gets all of her, methodology from him. And I'll say also that she has healed herself from these things. She started, losing hair and gaining weight and doing all this stuff. And she was like working out, just like, hellishly, and, eating almost nothing, and doing the keto and doing the fasting and doing all this stuff. And she was just falling apart. And so she had this radical sort of wake up call, and she started doing this instead, where she's just instead focusing on lowering estrogen, removing all of these toxins, focusing on high quality food intake, working out, but doing it more sort of like casually relaxed, like not just like brutalizing yourself and getting all these stress hormones heightened in your body. And she's had this complete turnaround in health, and she's lost weight. Actually, she's like, I eat more calories than I ever did then, and I lose more weight now. I look better than I've ever looked. She's like, I eat carbs, I eat sugars all day. I just do it in a healthy way. So pretty interesting stuff. And, I think she would be the first person to say, like, don't take any hormones unless it's progesterone. And only because we live in a world that is so heavily affecting our endocrine systems, and almost always resulting in estrogen dominance in men and in women. There is no safe birth control method, it turns out. There is no safe amount of hormones you can just dump into a system and hope things turn out right. There's no slicing up of any areas that can just be like, yep, 100%, this is great no matter what. Like, these aren't things that are true. And if we get back to anyways, like, what are we actually trying to do? We're trying to let young people just have sex with as many people as they feel like, just for fun. That's why we're doing all this. Probably not the goal we should be after. Probably we should be after the goal of going towards the idea that, like, there's a really good reason to not just do that when you're young. There's a really good reason to not just have sex with a bunch of people, or even just a few. There's a really good reason to just wait. There's a series of really good reasons that pay off for the rest of your lives. And so all you have to do is just not eat that marshmallow for a very short time. And then you actually get 2 marshmallows. You can't even imagine how good 2 marshmallows is. When you get those 2 marshmallows, you're like, man, I did it. I'm amazing. My life is amazing. Thank God for marshmallows. That's where we want to be. Value the family, value the child, find a really, really much healthier nation because of it. And until you master your endocrine system, your metabolism, and your family and relational wellness, and love yourself enough to take back your health, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
Yeah, come on, Rap Kings, baby. It's the rap machine. Yeah, check it. Great bearded pirate, my motherfucker unknown. Yeah, come on. In the place with my fist up, meaning I resist the bullshit that they feed us and lead us. This is just a part of the process, man. Just watch this, cause this shit's about to get crazy like a mosh pit. We lost it, toss it, let's start it again. Cause now with technology, with smarter men and women, this is the beginning, not the end. If this is the message of hope that I send, look on your TV, it's a culture of death. They'll keep on lying to the very last breath. We keep on striving and spreading the truth. It's hard to survive in this world for the youth. The door is closed, the old world is dead. Let's have an age of understanding instead. I'll include you and you include me. Let's see what we can build with some positivity. Let's go, you're moving too slow. Let me see your hands if you know what I know. Come on.
Rap like mummy, ain't no dummy in my rhyming. Started flowing freestyle and now they rhyming loud silence. On with the violence, bodies piling with the gray-bearded pirate. On your TV in 4K 3D virtual reality. Casualty of urban warfare. I know but I'm not scared, just prepared and aware. Shining my light through the tunnel of hope. Into the rope, but I'ma give it one more pull till the family is full. Take the bull by the horns and lead it to the slaughter. That would be harder and you would be softer. Sometimes I'm a monster and you forever imposter, which is champagne and lobster. This royalty, the way it was supposed to be. Hopefully the new door opens and the old one closes with way more focus and growth to mold us, and the truth that they should have told us.
To them screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The poppers see this mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet. Everyone got a gift, everyone got a light. They want you to forget that ish, cause they can't dim the bright. The positive vibration takes you past the sign shackles, from the sewers and the alleys in the moving castles. Who these assholes really serving with an exposed Achilles surgeon around the corner lurking to prove ascension trumps perversion? Learn them to catch fish and unplug the signal. Show them the simpletons now build the fucking temples.